Estas orelhas escuta que falo, estou versejando de que eu.
Hello, MEMUNG students. My name is Brittany, and I will be one of your chairs for the United Nations General Assembly Economic and Finance Committee. This video is going to focus on labor standards. It's important that you do follow-up research on your own, find out what speaks to you, and to understand what the position the member state you are representing holds on the matter. So I hope you find these videos instructional, and I will check in with you at the end.
Seca meus dedinhos, abre os braços e leva seu posse, a testa suada, provar que merece. Vamos valsar, vagabundo.
146 people died that Saturday. 125 of them young women. They were on the 8th, 9th, and 10th floor of the Ash Building in New York City in Greenwich Village. They couldn't get out the main exit. They raced towards the exit gate and the exit door was locked.
Tenho vento na vela, no meu vestido.
On December 14th, 2010, just 3 months shy of the 100th anniversary of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in New York, a fire broke out at the Hamin factory in Bangladesh on the outskirts of Dhaka. The flames were so great and the smoke was so dense they had to retreat. They ran through the cafeteria to the other side of the building, the west side, and they tried to go out the fire exits and the exit doors were locked. They were trapped. It gets worse. In Triangle, they made 14 cents an hour. But when you adjust that for inflation, that 14 cents an hour in 1911 is worth $3.18 today. The workers at the Hamin factory in Bangladesh on the outskirts of Dhaka, they're making at the top wage 28 cents an hour. That means that they're earning, their wages in Bangladesh today are 1/10 of what wages were in the United States 100 years ago. We're racing to the bottom.
The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in 1911 sparked outrage. The U.S. saw fundamental changes in labor laws then, but we can see the same kind of horror elsewhere today. As we have ended slave labor and child labor through domestic legislation, there are still these labor issues worldwide. Students should review the current international laws and domestic laws of the countries they represent in order to find a solution to these problems.
Tenho vento na vela, no meu vestido, voando no vento. Vamos valsar, vagabundo versado. Vamos vagar, o valor invisível.
Hamin doesn't allow the workers to organize. When the workers in Bangladesh struggled for a 35 cent an hour wage, can you imagine? 3.5 million garment workers, 80% of them young women, they protested. They were asking Walmart and Gap and the other companies for 35 cents an hour. You mean to tell me Gap and Walmart and the other companies couldn't pay 35 cents an hour? They wouldn't do it. And the police went out and attacked the workers. They were beaten. They were attacked by the police. They were beaten with clubs. They shot rubber bullets at the workers. They sprayed them with these powerful water cannons to just knock them down and sweep them off the streets. They put a dye in the water so they could be arrested later. My God, Walmart can't pay 35 cents an hour? When the workers went out and asked for that 35 cents an hour, the most modest demand, they were beaten. Products, the Gap label's protected under intellectual property and copyright laws. You make a knockoff of Gap, you're going to jail, you go to prison, they'll fine you. But when you say to Gap or Walmart or these other companies, can't we have similar laws to protect the rights of the 18-year-old women who made these garments? They say no. That would be an impediment to free trade.
To what extent is it the government's or the international community's responsibility to step in and regulate industry? The following clips cover child labor issues and labor rights for Chinese factory workers.
Child labor has many faces, has devastated many young lives. The last decade has seen their numbers decline, with 30 million fewer working children globally. But there are still an estimated 215 million girls and boys who start their days at work in a mine or a field rather than a classroom.
We go to the tobacco field, then we go to bed, and then follows the same. We wake up at 4 a.m. in the morning.
Today, according to the International Labor Organization, more than half of all child laborers are in the most hazardous forms of work. Some 60% are in agriculture, domestic work, or street vending. At even greater risk are children in commercial sexual exploitation, slavery, and forced labor, including those forced to serve as child soldiers. In 2006, the goal to eliminate these worst forms of child labor seemed within reach. However, in the last 4 years, child labor numbers have decreased only by 7 million, a mere 3%.
We are still making progress, but that progress is too slow. We still have 215 million children working in child labor. 115 million of those are in the worst forms of child labor. That's far too many, and the progress is far too slow for us to meet the goal of eliminating the worst forms of child labor by 2016.
Some countries, though hit by economic crisis, kept child labor at bay through programs that link social protection, education, health, and income. In Brazil, the Bolsa Familia program gives cash transfers to 12 million families who keep their children in school. In India, the world's largest school lunch program means poor rural children have a meal instead of work to look forward to each day.
I would tell kids who are working that we used to work too and waste our time. Now we come to school every day. Coming to school made us more intelligent.
Child labor has many faces, faces that are waiting to take their turn at a better future.
Hey guys, I'm Karen Cheng and you're watching The Run List. Do you own an iPhone? What about an iPad? Well, a labor rights group said today that those products may have been produced in Chinese factories under pretty shoddy conditions. New York-based China Labor Watch has accused a Taiwanese-owned supplier for Apple of mistreating its workers, doing things like hiring underage workers, forcing employees to work unpaid overtime, and in hazardous working conditions. The company is called Pegatron Core, and they assemble iPads and iPhones at factories in Shanghai and Suzhou. So far, Pegatron is denying these allegations, but has promised to carry out an investigation and correct any violations of Chinese labor laws. Apple is no stranger to these worker abuse accusations. One of its biggest suppliers, Foxconn, was involved in several scandals in recent years, including a spate of worker suicides at its plants in China. Since then, Apple has tried to improve its image by doing their own audits of suppliers to ensure workers are being treated fairly. China Labor Watch says it's carried out undercover investigations between March and July this year and had interviewed almost 200 Pegatron employees. It says the company has broken labor laws by withholding pay, and employees on average work 66 to 69 hours per week, despite Chinese laws mandating a 49-hour maximum. The organization says this latest report is part of efforts to see whether labor abuse in supplies for Apple is isolated or whether it's something much more common, and they believe the problem exists across many of Apple's suppliers. Companies that China Labor Watch investigated include Jabil, based in the US, several Chinese companies like United Wind, Riton, and Tenlong, as well as Malaysia-based Consentia. So what's the lesson here? China has been a very attractive place for global corporations to set up shop because labor is cheap and they can get away with much more in terms of environmental pollution and labor violations. But the question I have is, who is responsible for monitoring these kinds of things? The companies definitely are partly to blame, but isn't it also the government's role to supervise these companies? If labor laws are properly enforced and companies know that there will be legal consequences if they don't play by the rules, perhaps we wouldn't have to wait for whistleblowers to expose these types of mistreatments. What do you guys think about this? Why do we keep hearing about labor law violations in China? Is it up to multinationals to be law enforcers there? Should the suppliers be doing the right thing in the first place? Or is all of this the result of poor labor enforcement laws?
There's a lot of information out there, and it's important that you review legislation and measures that have already been passed, like the UN Domestic Workers' Rights Treaty, which became a reality on September 5th of 2013, and the UN's 10 Principles, a global compact in the areas of human rights, labor, the environment, and anti-corruption. The principles are as follows. Principle 1. Businesses should support and respect the protection of internationally proclaimed human rights, and Principle 2. Make sure that they are not complicit in human rights abuses. Principle 3. Businesses should uphold the freedom of association and the effective recognition of the rights to collective bargaining. Principle 4. The elimination of all forms of forced and compulsory labor. Principle 5. The effective abolition of child labor. And Principle 6. The elimination of discrimination in respect of employment and occupation. Principle 7. Businesses should support a precautionary approach to environmental challenges. Principle 8. Undertake initiatives to promote greater environmental responsibility. And Principle 9. Encourage the development and diffusion of environmentally friendly technologies. Principle 10 says businesses should work against corruption in all its forms, including extortion and bribery.
A risada segura vai evitar